Ever wonder what chickens do when you're not looking?
Operation Cover-Up! No chicken escapes from Tweedy's farm!
We've got to get out of here.
I think the truth is we didn't find it difficult because it happened so gradually, So there were just two of us, as you say. When we started, there were just two of us, me and David, and we did everything, everything. Wrote the stories, built the sets, lit the sets, did any paperwork, the tax forms and so on, made the tea, just did everything. And then one day you employ a third person. Oh, that's a bit easier. And then you employ a fourth person, and it gets easier and easier. So honestly, that gradient between two people and 15 people is very easy. I think then when you start to get bigger numbers, you're right to ask the question, because it does get more difficult when you have bigger numbers. Then you start dealing with something which is not quite instinctive, like a group of 50 people is like a wild animal to some extent. You can't control every part of it. That's the truth. When there's two of you, you control everything. When there's 10 of you, you've got a close understanding of everything that's happening. But when it's 100 people, then you stop knowing what's going on. But that's okay. It's normal. It's quite natural. So it's not painful. No, it's not painful. And so now, today, there are many projects happening that I know nothing about at all. Nothing, and I'm very happy with that. That's nice. It's good. You trust. You employ good people because you trust them, and if you trust them, that they'll do great work. It's a nice feeling. It's a lovely feeling. The fact that I can, I'll get an email and someone will say, "Look, we've just finished this project," and I'll think, "Really? I never even heard of this project, and now it's finished and it looks good." When you start out in animation, when you're very young, then just making something move is quite an achievement and very pleasing. And that was true for quite a long time, that just creating movement was satisfying. And then later that's not satisfying anymore, and you want to create the illusion of life, and then you want to go further than that, really. You want the illusion of thought, that the character has an inner life and is truly alive. And as you go along, as you get older and more experienced, this is true, that you see other people's work, and that should be influential, for various reasons. Like, it might be that you like a piece, you find the performance really compelling and it speaks to you, and that's a good thing. Or it might be that you have some understanding of timing or composition. So the skills of filmmaking, actually, as much as animation. And I suppose very occasionally I might be aware of seeing somebody do something, some little gesture or mannerism, and thinking, "Oh, that's good. I'll use that." That probably happens sometimes. But mostly, I think, in truth, most animators, and certainly me, you tend to animate from your own language of movement, So the gestures that I make, are the gestures that my puppet would make. But you're an actor. As an animator, you're very much an actor. You're trying to get into a role. And if you have 3 characters on stage at once, they should appear to be individuals. And so you don't want them all doing the same thing. I don't want them all making the gesture that I would make. I want them to have gestures which are specific and character-based. So probably the answer to your question eventually is that you should be aware and alert and receptive to performance and try to put that into your own work. But that performance might come from animation, or it might just come from live action. I mean, I think body language is a really interesting thing. I like body language very much. But my extremely famous colleague, Nick Park, who God knows is a genius, he doesn't really care about body language. He cares about something else. I don't know what it is. Comedy. He does comedy. So his characters, like Wallace, he can't move from his head down to his hips. So his body language is very, very simple and always kind of the same. But in real life, you watch people performing, or you watch people living, and you think, wow, that way that people hold their bodies when they're relaxed, or when they're trying to convey something, or when they're showing off. I think human body language is a wonderful thing, which I celebrate.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You've been a wonderful audience.
I think luckily, I can tell you quite simply, because in the first year or 2 years or something, we had 2 different sorts of work. And one was a character called Morph, who is made of modelling clay. He's this big, and he doesn't use language. You can't understand what he says, and he is emphatically for a family audience. So that we did for TV, kids TV. So we were doing Morph for kids TV, and at the same time, or about the same time, we also made our first film for adults, which was called Down and Out. And it was a story about a man, almost like an animated documentary about a man who was very poor, was trying to get a bed in a hostel to spend the night. So an adult, grown-up theme. So back then, this is in 1977, we were doing both things. And maybe, I guess we made a decision slowly. We made a decision very slowly, over the period of at least 10 years, 15 years, at least 15 years, to specialise in family entertainment. And honestly, that was mostly an economical reality, because in the UK then, there was a very happy period in the 80s when there was a great enthusiasm for independent adult animation, and we did a lot of great stuff in those years because it was being commissioned by the BBC and Channel 4 mostly. So two terrestrial networks were commissioning animation and paying real money to do these things. And that was great. These were happy days. We loved that. And then gradually, between 1990 and 2000, that just evaporated, and it wasn't there anymore. And so you couldn't make, well, we could have decided in one in one reality, we could have decided, okay, we are artists, and we will make art house films, and maybe 2 or 3 of us might have done that, yeah. But we didn't. But we decided no, we would make films that are commercially. I would never say they're commercial because I don't think that, but they're commercially viable. That there's a market for them, and those tend to be family films. And there's another element as well, that in '85, I think, we were joined by Nick Park, who created Wallace and Gromit. He came to join us, and very interestingly, Nick Park was at the National Film and TV School in London, and he made a film called A Grand Day Out, which is a funny story for everyone, for families. And at the time, but even more so now, that was kind of weird and aberrant behaviour, because if you happen to see the films from the National Film School today, they are all about misery, suffering, refugees, domestic abuse, strong adult themes. That's what most students want to do, actually, which is fine. It's fine. They feel passionate about things, and they want to make passionate films. Nick wanted to make a funny film, but he was really unusual in that instinct, really unusual. But his instinct was the one that is survived successfully for nearly 40 years. So there's no moral to the story. There's no moral to the story except that we moved in that direction. And we did it because that's where the work was, but the work was fun. And then it's true to say that after, this is a long answer, I'm sorry, but after about 15 years, we had a different kind of instinct, which was, we've created a studio, we've brought these people together, now we need to keep them going. So we had that different imperative, It wasn't just about the work, although the work is so important. It was also about the people, keeping the people employed.
That trophy's got my name on it.
She doesn't even have a beard.
That is very interesting. That's a very interesting question, because I don't know my answer until I start talking, and then we'll find out. Because I have 2 conflicting thoughts in my mind, The one is that as an employer, we are looking for people with specific skills. You're right, yes, we are. If we want to employ a model maker or an animator, let's just say, to join an existing team, there's a lot of competition for those places. A lot of people want those jobs. So why wouldn't we choose the very best ones? And we naturally would. So the animator, the most experienced, expressive, ideally funny animator is the one that we would look for. Not the most perfect, but the one with the most expressive, the one with the most life, the one with the most life in them is the person we would look for. So in that sense, the person that's specialised in puppet animation and has done it for, that's the main thing they've done, and they've focused on that, and they've got to be really good at it. That's what we choose. Okay, so I think that's probably the answer, that we would employ that person. But viewing it from a personal point of view, and maybe a slightly romantic point of view, a slightly nostalgic point of view, slightly, those were the days point of view, it was great fun when everyone did everything. So maybe this is the reality. When you're working at college in a team of, 2 or a team of 10, it's great to do everything, I think. I think it's fun, it's exciting, it's creative, there's improvisation, and there's, there's moments of despair and moments of elation and invention and so on. And I think very fondly of those days. And when we were 10 people, everyone did a bit of everything. I would paint the set, and I would, make the props maybe, or certainly do the writing and the animating. And that was a lovely feeling, which everyone enjoys. So I suppose, okay, so my special careful political answer is the ideal thing is you work in a team, but you have a speciality. That's probably the best thing.
Grommet, old pal, I'll need assistance. Ow!
Well, that's very difficult. I think that the best short film is certainly The Wrong Trousers, which is 30 minutes long. And I think the best movie is probably The Curse of the Were-Rabbit, which is a movie length. But even so, I would have to vote for the one that I don't know. Chicken Run is very, very good. I mean, Chicken Run is really good, which I co-directed with Nick. And when I see it again, it's a very good shape to it, and it's got some great moments. It's got a great ending. That's okay, so that's good. And then the one that I directed, called The Pirates, is the one I feel most warmly about, because I felt we tried something a bit different, which didn't completely work in terms of the marketplace, but who cares about that? But creatively, I thought it was really nice that we tried something slightly different, and it's more accurately my sense of humour, I think, is in The Pirates, which I'm proud of, and it looks great, and making it was fun. I mean, I'm proud of that. No one watching would ever know. But when you make one of these films, very often you just about kill the crew, because it gets to be so hard towards the end, and everyone goes crazy and flies into despair because it was so difficult. And if you ask someone to redo a shot, it's a disaster. And if you throw away a shot which has already been shot and you don't use it, it's a disaster. And that tends to happen always. But it didn't happen with The Pirates. At least I don't think so. I have a very selective memory, and I choose to think that The Pirates was a very, very happy shoot, and that's how I remember it. And everyone felt great about it. All the crew felt great about it. Big crew, like 300 people, and everyone knew what was going on, and everyone was inspired and happy, I think.
Going to fly over that fence, and Mr. Rhodes is going to show us how.
Did you say fly?
There's a statistic of which I'm proud. It's very, very annoying, is that Chicken Run, which is 20 years ago, is the most successful stop motion film ever made. So that's ridiculous in a way, because we and Leica and other people have been making films, lots of good films since then, and none of them has been so successful. And actually, I was going to say I don't understand it. 10 years ago, I didn't understand it. Now I kind of understand. I kind of understand that. There are so many ways to watch movies or anything, so many ways without going to the cinema. And so going to the cinema is a special thing and a very expensive thing. And if you've got a family, 4 people will go to the movies, they spend a lot of money on it. And so I think, and the movies which are successful, as we all know, are these massive, expensive blockbusters, whether that be from Pixar or Disney, or whether it be Star Wars or one of the Marvel movies. The movies that families go to see are hugely expensive with massive spectacle and special effects and so on. And sometimes no brain at all. But and we don't do that. And our films do appear smaller. But I don't think that's a bad, I don't think small is a bad adjective. Big and small, which one's better? Well, one's bigger. So a small film with a real heart and a great story is to me more important than a big film with spectacle and noise and stuff. But I understand that the marketplace has decided people going to the movies want a big spectacle, and stop motion doesn't do that so much. I think that animation stop motion is an interesting thing because its difference to other forms of animation is very small, really. I mean, for example, Missing Link, which is recently out, like a film. Who could tell really whether that was stop motion? I don't think you can tell. It looks like CG to me. My wife assumed it was CG when we watched it. Our work is more obviously stop motion for various reasons. And I think there's something important there, personally. I think it's important that the audience understands how it's done, I think. Because I think that's magic. I think it's magic. If you know those are puppets and they're alive, if you know those two things at the same time, that's magic, I think. With CG, with 3D, you know they're not alive, but they are alive. But what else they are, who knows? They're just, what are they? Noughts and zeros and ones in a box is what they are. Yeah, brilliantly designed, but not. I don't think it's magical in the same way. But with and to swap. While I'm talking about, do you know Kermit the Frog? Have you ever seen Kermit the Frog? So that we can see he's made of green fabric, and his eyes don't move. We can see it, and we believe he's alive, and that's magic. So and I think that's to me that's a special thing that stop motion does. And all I can say is that I observe that there's a place for it, but it's not such a big place as the place for CG. But there's an audience that cares about those things, luckily.
You want to be Pirate of the Year? Do they just give it to the guy with the fattest parrot?
She is not fat. She's just big boned.
She's fat, dude. Oh, God, come on.
To be absolutely honest, no. I'd like bigger budgets. I think I'd like bigger budgets. Yeah, yes, more money is what I want, really. We've got some films we're working on now that we're thinking about now, and I don't know what money, I shouldn't talk about money, but okay, I believe, I'm informed, I think that The Missing Link, the budget apparently was something like $100 million apparently, so they say. Whereas if we make a film like the Farmageddon, I don't even know. I literally don't know the budget, but I think it's more. I think it's about, you know, a quarter of that. And there are limitations in that. I mean, I always say, nobody gets rich out of making these films. You spend a lot of money, but nobody gets rich. The animators and the model makers wish we would pay them more, you know, and I'd like to pay them more. I'd like to, but the budget doesn't let us do that. And you know, part of our creative conversation, I confess, is, ooh, that would be great, but we can't afford it. You know, yeah, that's a great scene, but we can't afford it, so we'll have to do, instead of doing that scene, we'll have to do this smaller version. So, so I think slightly bigger budgets would be a good thing. Wow, that sounds terrible, but I think that would be a good thing for us.
The other is his dog, who never says anything.
It is true that with the Pirates, there wasn't very much clay, really. It was mostly puppet animation. In fact, the amount of clay was very small. It was very minimal. Similarly, with Farmageddon, it's not very much. There's some clay in there. I don't really mind about the technique very much. No, I don't. Right now, just now, back in Bristol. Right now, we're shooting a thing called Robin, and that is going to be made with felting, which is the same technique they use for Oh Willie, if you know that film, or there was a Greek film called Enough, if you know that film. So puppets, but the surface is like wool. So it's a different technique. So there's no clay at all in that. So we're doing that now. So we're now making a half-hour TV special for Netflix with no clay at all. So the short answer is I don't really mind about the technique. I think plasticine is great for various things. It's great for various things, and it might be possible to do a film that had much more clay in it. That would be interesting to use it, to use that very, very tactile material even more dramatically. That might be fun. In fact, that's a good idea. In fact, I think, yeah.
The name's Rocky.
And what brings you to England?
Why, all the beautiful English chicks, of course.
Pushy Americans.
Hi, how are you?
Overpaid, oversexed, and over here.
Which is the thing I can talk about most honestly. I think what they said earlier on is true. That what we look for in an animator is personality. Personality and cleverness or something like that, or wit. So, and that comes across in performance, timing, which is so important in animation, performance and timing. Yes, and storytelling. Interesting that those things go together. You know, if you haven't got a good story, it's hard to produce good animation. Actually, you know, if you haven't got good timing, it's impossible to produce good animation. You know, I just mentioned a minute ago. I mentioned a film called Enough, and it came from a Greek woman at the Royal College of Art in London, and the reason I'm mentioning it now is that the animation is very simple, I think. The really general tip I guess, is to be incredibly as outgoing and as helpful as you can be. This is funny words to use, I know, but you know, if we're going to employ a young person, they're not going to. That young person is not going to be straight onto set animating some big scene in the movie. That's going to take 3 or 4 years to get there, or else you're a genius, which is a useful thing to be. If you can, for example, Nick Park is a genius. He's not very outgoing. Well, I mean, he is now. But when he joined us, he was very shy, typical animator, very shy, very nervous, private. If you brought him into a meeting with someone, he would not be very convincing. You know, he wouldn't put on a good show, but he doesn't need to because he's a genius, right? So all those things, and then to practice as much as you can, because I always say that animating is just performance, and if you were to play the violin and step on the stage with an orchestra, by the time you played your first note on the stage, you would have practiced for 10,000 hours, wouldn't you? Because that's what violinists do. They practice or pianists do. They practice every day for hours, and that's great, you know. And ideally, an animator would do the same sort of thing. They would just they would do a lot of it and keep learning from it and get really good, because my first animation is terrible now, and it took me, you know, 5 or 6 years to get any good, and that was with a lot of practice.